This is OwlUp, where learning happens in minutes, not hours. For a deeper journey, explore all our courses at owlup.co. Now, let's dive in. Chapter 2 of Grief and Loss, Finding Your Way Through the Nonlinear Path of Grief. In this chapter, you'll learn: explain why grief is not a linear process. Let's dive in. Most grieving people don't follow anything close to the famous 5 stages. A woman laughs at a joke at work, then cries in the car. A father feels calmer 6 months after a loss, then shattered on the anniversary. Grief isn't a straight line. It's a shifting pattern we're only beginning to map. Only about 11% of bereaved spouses in a major long-term study showed anything close to a neat, stage-by-stage pattern. For everyone else, grief moved more like weather than a schedule, clearing, returning, changing without asking permission. This matters because many people quietly judge themselves. I'm not crying enough. Why am I suddenly worse a year later? They assume they're doing it wrong, when in reality they're fitting a far more common pattern: non-linear grief. Researchers now talk about trajectories instead of stages: resilient, oscillating, delayed, or prolonged courses that depend on personality, culture, support, and the kind of loss. Some people function surprisingly well while hurting deeply inside. Others feel flattened months after seeming okay. In this episode, we'll look at how these winding paths actually unfold, and how recognizing them can reduce shame and guide you toward the right kind of help. Some researchers now zoom in even closer, studying micro-patterns in grief, the hour-to-hour swings, not just the long-term arc. They found that what you do in those smaller waves, who you talk to, what you avoid, how you make sense of the loss, can gradually shift your overall trajectory. Culture and family rules also play a big role. Whether tears are welcomed or hidden, whether talking about the dead is encouraged or seen as keeping them here. These forces quietly shape which parts of your pain get airtime and which parts go underground. A Colombia team followed bereaved spouses for 5 years and found something quietly radical. Most people started out hurting, then showed small, uneven improvements long before they ever felt ready. That matters because the mind often waits for a feeling of readiness that never comes in a clean, all-at-once way. One newer line of research suggests that what you do during those tiny windows of just barely okay time may matter more than how devastated you feel at your worst point. People who gently re-entered bits of ordinary life, answering one email, walking the dog, cooking a simple meal, often reported more capacity later, even if the pain stayed intense. It's not about forcing productivity. It's about giving your nervous system brief chances to practice existing in a world that now feels unfamiliar. Attachment style shows up here too. In several studies, people with more avoidant attachment tended to look fine on the surface, but reported intense, private preoccupation with the loss. Those with more anxious attachment often did the opposite. Their distress was visible and sometimes overwhelming to others, yet they also tended to seek help sooner. Neither pattern is wrong, but each can pull your path in different directions, one towards silent overfunctioning, the other toward feeling swallowed by emotion. Culture shapes these patterns as strongly as personality. Strobe and Schutt's meta-analysis showed that in communities where ongoing bonds with the dead are honored, through ancestor rituals, home altars, or speaking to the deceased, people were less likely to meet criteria for prolonged grief disorder, not more. In cultures that prize moving on, mourners sometimes hid or fragmented their grief to fit expectations, then showed more intense spikes around anniversaries or private reminders. Loss circumstances twist the path further. Sudden, violent, or preventable deaths are more likely to tangle grief with trauma responses: nightmares, startle, numbness. In those cases, it's common for trauma treatment, like grounding or EMDR, to ease some of the stuckness, allowing grief itself to move more freely. By contrast, after long illness, people may experience a confusing mix of sorrow and relief, then judge themselves harshly for the relief, even though studies show it's a common, non-pathological response. Clinicians now focus less on how long you've been grieving and more on two questions. Is your life getting any narrower? And is your grief leaving room, even tiny pockets, for meaning, connection, or rest? Over months, answers to those questions often tell us more about your trajectory than any calendar or checklist. A therapist might see 3 clients in one afternoon, all grieving the same kind of loss, yet moving in completely different ways. One woman notices she can handle meetings at work, but falls apart paying bills at home. Another feels mostly steady until she walks past a certain park. A third finds mornings unbearable, but evenings oddly calm. These aren't random quirks. They're clues to where the loss is most entangled with daily life. In research interviews, some people describe pockets of okayness, watching a show, gardening, playing with a child, long before they feel generally better. Clinicians sometimes treat those pockets like fragile trail markers. If you can locate one, you can often build another nearby. Think of a basketball player returning after an injury. The first practice isn't a full game, it's a few careful free throws. In the same way, small, repeatable bits of manageable experience can gradually stretch what feels possible while still honoring the depth of the loss. Some researchers now talk about grief climate instead of grief stages, the broader conditions that make certain paths more likely. As digital traces of mourning pile up, texts, posts, wearables, we may be able to spot subtle shifts, like sleep or heart rate changes, days before a crash in mood. That opens both promise and risk. Support could arrive earlier, but only if systems are designed more like a sensitive coach than a boss keeping score. Your challenge this week: notice one moment a day when your grief doesn't match what others expect, maybe laughing at a meme or suddenly tearing up in a checkout line. Treat each moment like a data point in a sketchbook, not a verdict. Over time, the scattered dots can reveal a pattern only you are qualified to read. This was OwlUp, your daily step forward. To keep learning with structured courses and more insights, go to owlup.co. Until tomorrow!